Hi everyone, it's Desiree, and I am here we're just going to make a card. And what I'm actually going to be using are the Altenew Watercolor Brush Markers. Altenew had reached out and they actually sent me these to play with. And Lord knows I love coloring mediums to play around with. Now this set here is the Tropical Fiesta Set. So what I'm going to do is we're going to work with this one. Now, just so you know, there are two other sets that are available from Altenew when it comes to their watercolor brush markers. Now, these are not like the zigs or anything else. So these here have ink in them. So let me just get these out. Just going to dump these out here. Look at the beautiful colors that they have. And again, this is the Tropical Fiesta Set, so I'll keep that there so you can see all the beautiful colors. So here, these are like our water brush pens that we use. Altenew does have those as well when it comes to that, where you fill your barrel up with water. So you would just unscrew this, and then you fill this up with water, and then you put this back on. So, and then you can just get water down from the barrel of that by squeezing it, and you can see, you know, you get water, and then you can just use it like you would a brush and a bucket or a cup of water. These here are very similar, except for the fact that they have the ink inside the barrel. So when you squeeze it, you're going to get all of this ink out. Of course, it's not going to be water. Now, when you get them, there's a yellow band that sits right here. So if I open this, now I'm going to keep this up like this, because you activate it. You really shouldn't do what I just did there. So don't do that. But there's a yellow band that will sit in here. So you unscrew the top and then you drop off the yellow band. And I think, no, I don't. And then when you screw this back on, you actually activate it. So it's going to help pull when you push on it. And it says push right there. I don't know if you can see that. Let me get that in the light. There we go. It says push right there. You'll have ink activated. And there's many ways that we can use these. I do apologize. Allergies. It's allergies. The reason why I sound this way. So, I mean, you can paint directly with these to get your color down into your image. You can scribble it down onto a mat, or a palette, or whatever you're looking for, and pick up the color that way. Whatever you're comfortable with. The beauty also with these is these are close. They mirror their ink line, their stamping ink line, which is really great also. So everything is matching along with each other, just like with their alcohol markers, the colors match their sets, their ink sets. Everything just comes together when it comes to this. I'm always comfortable when it comes to these, because again, these are not like the zigs or the Arteza brush markers, okay? I'm one for control. Now, I don't know about you, but I must have control. So, depending upon how I use these will depend upon what look I'm looking for. So, I'll probably show you, hopefully, maybe a couple ways. But the stamp set that I'm going to use, and I just think it's fitting right now, is called Happy Together. There's a beautiful floral image here. You have a bud here, and then you have an open flower here. And you can see that it also comes with a solid image that you can stamp on inside of this. And there is a matching die with this as well. And you have some beautiful sentiments for anniversary, you know, for couples, and so forth. So I'm going to use that. And I'm going to use these colors. Now remember, I did say that they have two other sets, and they do look like this. So this set here is the Winter Wonderland, and you can see the colors that come in those as well. So these are very, what I consider regal colors. I mean, you can tell just by the cardinal there. Very strong, empowering colors. And the other one is your Spring Garden set. So these are more on the floral line. They're bold and bright. When I use the term regal, I mean, you know, deep, dark. They make a statement. These also make a statement, but they're just in a bright shade. So this is almost more of a rainbow tone that comes down with these as well. But I do want to focus on the set that Altenew had sent to me. And I just couldn't wait to start playing with them. So the first thing that I'm going to show is I'm going to get my image stamped, and I'm going to use my Canson XL watercolor paper. That is my watercolor paper of choice. So I'm going to have that stamped already, and the ink that I'll use to stamp that image is my VersaFine Black. I like the crisp lines that it gives me, and it is a waterproof ink as well. There are many others out there that you can use. That's just what I like to, especially with this. It's got such fine details, so I will pull that in. So I'm going to get all of that ready. And what I'm going to show you next is how I would swatch these. I don't get too crazy with swatching anymore. You know, before I wanted to swatch everything and see what it looked like. And I think with my colored pencils that I did, you know, I'm one, when I have an image, I take my colored pencils and I create my palette off of that, because something's going to change, or I'm going to throw in a color, you know, on the side, and so forth. And to have this, you know, sometimes with some of our colors, we have so many color choices. To swatch them all, we would be doing that forever. One thing that I will always swatch are alcohol markers. Those I will take the time. I've had a couple videos that I've done with those. I've swatched out different versions there, because those are very, to me, I'm challenged when it comes to alcohol markers. So I really want to see that color. When it comes to our watercolors or our colored pencils, I'm good with just throwing everything in. So I will be right back, and I'll show you how I will real quick create a very simple swatch. I'll have it ready and just show, you know, how I'll do this, with showing how dark it looks to compared to the light version. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I am back. Let me get this out of my way. So you can see I have my image stamped twice, because I'm going to show you two different ways that we can use these. So how do I swatch? So I just take this is a piece of scrap Canson XL watercolor paper, because this is what I will use these on when it comes to, you know, the paper. You can use Bristol as well, but these work very well on the Canson XL watercolor. So I have my water brush here as well, and a regular brush with a pot of water is just fine as well. So when I say control, again, I do use these very differently. So this here is a piece of plastic. It's actually the small Altenew palette, and they also have a larger one that I like. So I like to test it out here, and I'm getting plenty of color that's coming out here, but I'm just going to prime it just a little bit, get that color going down. And what I like to do, I'm going to make sure that I have my purple wine, and I'm on the purple wine line. So I'm going to turn this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put color down, and I am going to squeeze this just a little bit, and it's all in the squeeze. You know, you get to, you know, sometimes it'll drip. That's why I always have my mat, and then I always have like a pot. I'll put some water down on that, and I'm going to start at the top, and I'm just going to swoosh her out. Because when I'm looking at these, and then I have my rag here where I'll just clean off my water brush. So now that's going to show me what the darkest looks like down to the light. And I'm going to keep on doing that with each of my colors. So I know I'm crimson, crimson. So again, I'm going to open it up, make sure I've got some color. I'm going to push just gently. I'll see some bubbles coming up with it because I do want to make sure that I get color down. Like that's a little dry for me. So I'm going to just squeeze and I see a drop. I'm going to real quick put that drop there. And I'm going to put that down. Now that's a lot of color down, but that's okay. I'm going to come in here. And what I'm going to do is when I've got a lot of color there, I'm going to come from the bottom. And you can see how it's just, she's just moving, which again is fine. But I will use that. And then I'm just going to move on to my next one. So my next one is Sun-Kissed. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to see what's coming out. I'm going to go back and forth a couple times, pull that up. I'll pick up some water with my brush. I'm going to come in and I'm going to push her out. So again, I'm seeing those color values. Now I'm not getting too much of a color value on my crimson because, you know, I've got a lot of water, but what I can do is I can pull her out from the end of it and you can see how well she'll just move. So I get to see the differences in those colors. Now this one here is Sweet Leaf. So I'm going to come down here again, testing, and we'll put some color down. I'm going to squeeze just a little bit, just get her primed. I've got more color coming out now. Pick up some water from my palette over here, and I'm just going to pull her out. So that's my objective. I just want to see the different color values. I can go back in here and just pull some more down just to see what they look like. Here's my fresh lemon. Again, I'm priming just a little bit. I see a drop there. I'm going to put that drop down. And you can see right now it looks close to the Sun-Kissed, but when I come in with my water, I'm really going to pull her out because I want to know what that color just looks like. So now I can see the difference in those two. These are beautiful, bright, vibrant colors. Again, I'm going to test it out. Forgot to test it on my mat, but that's okay. I'm getting bold here. I'm going to bump her out there. And I'm just going to come in, swoosh her around, and pull her out. And that's all I'm looking for. I don't get too crazy. I know, you know, again, we want to swatch so that we know. If you are a swatcher, I am not saying not to swatch. Me, I just want to get down and dirty and start crafting. I'll figure out what that color looks like as I get going. So I'm okay with it. I'm just going to put a little bit more water down on here. I tend to do that with my water brushes too. Get water down and then I'll pick up that water because, you know, again, for me, it's all about the control. And I really can't control that sometimes. This is a beautiful dark blue. Love that dark blue. So I like being able to pull up my colors or pull up my water because, again, I don't like it going all over the place or anything like that. I do suggest, too, that sometimes when you prime them, they can, like, somewhat get backed up, so to speak. So when you do open them, I do recommend that you just open them away from your project because they can splatter, you know, create a droplet, which would be fine because then we would just have other droplets going on. Again, when I'm pushing, see now I've got a drop going on there. So that's a lot of ink that came out. Because again, once you get them primed, they'll get going. And even though, you know, some people might say, oh, okay, that's a lot of waste. And it is, by all means. And I don't like to do that. I hold my inks very preciously. But again, I'll use that for something else. These do last for a while. And what's great is these are refillable. So yay when it comes to this product. So this is what they look like. You know, you've got a nice, it's called Lava Rock. So you got a nice gray, you have a brown, you have a dark, and you have a turquoise. You have two different shades of greens that will go very well together. You've got a beautiful orange and a yellow, and then a nice, beautiful deep red and a beautiful purple. So some beautiful colors going on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to a voiceover while I paint this, because I want you to see all of it. And I think if I kept all of this in, it would be a very long video. I'm sure I'm already at 15 minutes. So I just want you to see everything on how I use it. So I'm going to show you going directly from the pen onto the piece itself and then pulling it out with some water and what that looks like. Okay, so we are now in voiceover mode and we've just sped this up just a little bit. So I'm going to show you two ways that I work with a watercolor brush this way, the ink well. So we're going to do wet on wet and we're going to do dry with wet. So when it comes to the wet on wet, and it'll give you two different looks. So for the wet on wet, I take the area and I wet it. And I make sure that there is a lot of water in there. I don't want it just damp. I want it, you can see the puddle. Now, I did emboss these two images. So both of these techniques that I use, I do find when I'm using these brushes, these well brushes, I want to have embossed lines. It kind of creates that barrier for me. And you can see I'm filling in the area and I'm just touching the tip of the marker to that puddle. And that puddle's actually drawing out the ink. So I don't have to worry about picking the color up or anything like that. And it's going to move in that puddle. Now you can tilt it. You saw that I was tilting it and moving it just to get that color to flow. Basically, as this dries, and these do take longer to dry because again, I'm creating that well, that puddle, so to speak, of water. So again, it will take longer to dry. All right, so now you can see I'm coming in. The first color I used was crimson, and the second color I'm using is fresh lemon. And I'm just coming in then with my water brush because again, that water's already saturated in there. So that's why I'm only working on a few petals at a time. I'll bring in my water brush with just water in it to try to move them around. But again, I want them to move on their own. I love the way that it looks. I will come in after I put the water in the well. I will add some of the crimson and then I'll come in with the sun-kissed and then I'll come in with the water brush because I'm adding more water to it to get it moving. For these smaller areas of this flower, I can do a larger area because they're so small. I'll now just touch the bases of the petals with the red, the crimson, and then I will just glide over with the sun-kissed. So you can see with this one, by having all of your water down first, well, in anything, you don't have to be exact, okay? When I work with the watercolor brushes, and I say the wells, I'll keep saying that term, because these are very different than the Zig. These are very different than the Arteza Real Brush. These are refillable. These have ink in them. This is watercolor. You can put them on a palette and pick up that color and paint with them. They're very versatile. The tips on these pens come to a wonderful, wonderful point. Okay, so, keep that in mind when it comes to these. But you can see you've got all of these different colors, but you can also see you don't have the harsh lines. Okay, like in some things. It all depends on the image, on which way I'm going to go. So the wet on wet allows these to move. If you look at the first petals that I created first, and I'm actually pointing to the screen like you can see me, you can see how it's just blended. You can see from where I started, these colors are just blending. You don't have that harsh line. So again, wet on wet will give you that effect. Now, what I refer to as the dry on wet, I am going to come in with the color from the pen itself straight onto my watercolor. And again, this is Canson XL watercolor. Now what I do is, now the water brush, just holding the water, does a lot of this work. So I take the ink from the pen and I put it down at the base. That's where I want the shadow to be. Then I start from the other end, from where I put the ink, and I'm pushing on the water brush to get water, or I'm dipping into a water source, and I'm coming down to where the ink is. And you can see just how beautifully the ink moves, okay? But I'm not going down to the edge, where the edge of the line is for the petal or the image. I'm just touching the tip of where that ink is, and you can see these movements. Now, you might sit there and say, okay, well, isn't this the same thing? You're putting the water down into the wink, wink, wink. All right. You're putting the water down into the ink, but you're getting this difference because you're not moving all of it. You don't have the area wet first. Okay, it's dry. So the ink is actually getting saturated into the paper. So by just adding the water to the tip of that line, it's only going to pull that area out. So you can have these differences in the shadows. And that's where I'm putting the ink, just where I think the shadow should be, the darkest point. But when I come up to it with that brush, I'm pulling it out. Now, if I need to go back into that puddle or that petal, wherever I've already added the water and gone down into the ink is also coming up into my water brush. So I need to clean that off and make sure it's got fresh water on it, because again, I want all of the tips to be as light as they can. Yes, you're adding water, but it will still flow differently than the wet on the wet technique. So you'll see the differences. Again, I am just adding into where I want the darkest of the shadow, and then I'm pulling it out. Now, if my brush still has some of that ink on it, then I may go over in an area to get it a little bit darker, or maybe I want that petal to have all of that tint of blue. But because I'm not going down to the other side where I've put the ink first, I'm just touching it, I'll still have that extremely dark, accented area coming into the petal. This is how I work with these watercolor well brushes. Okay? I am not a watercolorist. I am so just not there. I mean, there are so many videos out there where people do wonderful, and they're just absolutely beautiful things when it comes to these watercolor pens. This is just what I found works for me, and I really like the results. It does depend upon my image also, which way that I'll use the pens, whether I use them on a dry surface or a wet surface. It all depends on how I want that look to be. Now, usually when I do the wet on wet, that's kind of like a base for me. Usually once that's dry, I will come in with the pens and add the little tiny flecks. So I will be continuing to use these to show you, that technique as well. Sometimes if you go over once it's dry, that's called glazing, I believe. I just put fleck strokes, especially if I'm dealing with florals. So it is a difference when it comes to that, but I only will put the flecks in when it's when I use the wet on wet technique. I did not do that here because I really did like the way these colors came out for that flower. I didn't want to add anything else to them. So you can see now this here, again, because of the water from the water brush, I do have a lot of water. sitting on the blue petals as well. I need to let those dry, and you can see once they dry, I've got a softer effect from the red, and I've kind of got harsh lines from the blue. But you can tell it's still a flower. It's kind of a sketchy look, and I do tend to go with that. So what I'm doing here, I have a scrap piece of Canson XL. I've made a rectangle just filled with water. I mean, it is puddled on there. And you can see as I move and tip this, it gets soft. I just touch the edge and I let it move. If I put, now I'm going to be putting a lot of ink here, but if I go straight onto the dry from the ink pen, now you can see I started away from it and I just touched the tip of it. You saw how wide that area was. This is what that water will do, and you can see the ink just pulls into it. And letting it dry like that, it will hold that shape. So again, one's a little softer than the other. So those are the two differences, and again, that's how I work. So these are what the two cards look like after we have completed. I've die cut them both using the die that corresponds with the stamp set, and I stamped the sentiment for two lovely hearts who are inseparable. I thought that was really cute and adorable. So when I die cut the red flower, I took it right onto my standard A2 size card base. We can do that. We don't have to have a mat or anything else. But for my blue one, again, you've got those harsh edges. You never know how it's going to dry. And this is one that I do gravitate more to, more so when it comes to an image like this. I did run a piece of shimmer paper through an embossing folder just to get that texture in the background. So same image, two different ways to work with the Altenew Watercolor Brush Markers. I'm going to add the word well, ink well, markers, but they are great to use. You can use them in many different ways if you're one that has to have control like I do, and know what it's going to do. You know, you just don't have to use them straight from the pen. So I will show other projects with those. This is one of these types of things when it comes to watercolors, and that's where they fit, are kind of my second medium of choice. So I do hope you enjoyed today's project, and I am very thank you, and I say thank you to Altenew to reach out and send me that product to play with. I really, truly enjoyed it. As always, the products that I use will be listed down below in the video description, and if you have any questions, by all means, please put those down below as well, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you haven't already, I'd love for you to subscribe. Make sure you hit that button, make sure you ring the bell, and hit the thumbs up. You always want to know when the next video is live. I hope everyone is enjoying their day, and by all means, please make sure you are still staying safe along with your family. Let's take care of each other during this time. It is a part of history. But this is also a perfect time. So get into those crafty spaces and enjoy yourself. Get lost in the craft and always be creative.